The median American retiree has about $400,000 in net worth. Here's what nobody shows you on the next slide. Half of it is their house. They will statistically not sell it. Of the $200,000 that's actually liquid, the average retired household burns through $60,000 a year. That money runs out at 84, and that's the median. The absolute middle of 10,000 simulations, the unlucky half goes broke before 80. Oh, and here's the part that never makes the summary graphic. According to Fidelity's 2024 estimate, a retired couple will spend $315,000 on healthcare over the course of retirement, not counting long-term care. $315,000. That's more than the entire liquid net worth of the household that's supposed to be paying for it, before a single prescription, before a single hospitalization, before they've even started arguing about who gets the better recliner. This isn't a story about people who were reckless. This is a story about a machine that looks perfectly functional from the outside, right up until the moment the slot eats your last bill and gives you nothing back. I'm going to show you exactly where the mechanism breaks. I'm also going to give you 4 specific moves, not diversify your portfolio, not cut your lattes, actual mechanical levers that change the outcome in ways you can measure before you're 84 and measuring them in months instead of years. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most of the ones online are mathematically wrong. They're using market return assumptions from an era that isn't coming back. It runs BlackRock and Vanguard logic against your actual numbers to find the specific weak points in your plan. And I only ask for your email to send you the report so I don't hold on to your financial data. Link is in the description. Here's the frame I want you to carry through this entire video. Your retirement savings is a vending machine. Fully stocked, you can see everything inside the accounts. The balances, the net worth figure, the number that made you feel like you did something right. It looks great. But roughly half the inventory is locked behind a second pane of glass that doesn't open until you sell your house and move somewhere cheaper. The machine charges $60,000 a year to operate. So every year, you're feeding real liquid cash into a slot that only accepts liquid cash. The home equity is visible on the display. The machine just won't take it. That's the vending machine problem. Every time I say that phrase today, that's what I mean. Your net worth display says one thing, your accessible spending power says something else, and the gap between those two numbers is where retirement plans go to quietly fail. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you why the one Social Security decision most Americans make by default is costing them between $60,000 and $120,000 in lifetime benefits made without a single calculation out of pure psychological habit. But first, I need to show you how the vending machine gets stocked and why the stocking process has been concealing a structural problem for about 30 years. The Federal Reserve runs something called the Survey of Consumer Finances. It's the most comprehensive picture we have of what American households actually own. The most recent release, median net worth for 55 to 64-year-olds is about $365,000. For 65 to 74-year-olds, the cohort arriving at the retirement finish line right now, it's about $410,000. $410,000. That sounds like something. Strip out the house. Home equity represents roughly half of total net worth for the median retiree household. So your accessible pile, 401k, savings accounts, brokerage, comes to about $200,000. $200,000 is what you actually have to work with. Not 410, 200. And before the comments fill up with they'll sell the house and downsize, there's a Vanguard mobility study that directly addresses this assumption. In your 20s, more than a quarter of Americans move every year. By age 70 to 79, that number collapses to under 6%. Under 6% of people in their 70s move in any given year. And of people 60 and over who do relocate, only about 19% move out of state. 1 in 5. The other 4 stay in the same state, usually the same county, which means they're trading one expensive local market for a slightly cheaper house in the same region with the same tax structure, the same insurance market, the same property tax assessments. The vending machine just moved to a slightly smaller display case. On the spending side, the numbers have been moving hard in the wrong direction. A retired American household spent about $40,000 a year in 2012. By 2020, that had climbed to $50,000. Since 2020, it's $60,000. Bureau of Labor Statistics, Consumer Expenditure Survey. Both sources land at roughly $5,000 a month for the average retired household. And this is not lavish. This is housing, utilities, food, transportation, healthcare premiums, and something occasional like flying to see a grandchild graduate. $5,000 a month, every month, $200,000 liquid, $60,000 in annual spending. The machine is hungry, and the accessible slot is less than half full. Let me introduce you to someone I'll call Gerald. This is a composite, not a real name, but a real type of situation I've looked at carefully. Gerald did everything correctly. He worked the same company for 35 years. Never skipped a 401k contribution. Paid off his house in his early 60s. Retired at 65 with $400,000 in net worth, a Social Security check just under $2,000 a month, and the reasonable satisfaction of a man who'd followed the script. The vending machine display looked excellent. Gerald felt fine. 18 months in, his county reassessed property values, and his annual tax bill climbed $900. His homeowner's insurance jumped by more than 30%. This is happening across the country right now because reinsurance markets are repricing climate exposure in ways that most homeowners haven't felt yet, but absolutely will. Medicare plus a supplemental plan was costing him $6,400 annually. He hadn't taken a single vacation. No boat, no country club. Gerald was living in his house, driving a used Camry, and eating at mid-tier restaurants on Tuesdays when the early bird special ran. His actual monthly burn was $4,900. Social Security covered $2,000 of that. The gap, the draw from his liquid $200,000 was $22,800 a year. He'd done the math. 9 years of runway, roughly. He was fine. But Gerald had forgotten 3 things. He'd forgotten that inflation keeps moving after you retire. He'd forgotten the sequence of returns problem, which I'll explain in a minute, and which is different from and worse than average market risk. And he'd forgotten that he was 66, which means statistically, he had a greater than 50% chance of living past 85. Gerald's vending machine had a slow leak behind the display panel. Everything looked fully stocked. It wasn't. Now here's what a Monte Carlo simulation does to that situation. You run 10,000 different market scenarios, different return sequences, different inflation trajectories, different recession timings, and you look at the distribution. With 200,000 liquid, a 60-40 stock bond allocation, and withdrawals of 22,800 a year on top of Social Security, the median outcome shows the money running out at 84. The unlucky 20% of simulations end before 80. The lucky 20%, the people who caught a favorable market sequence in early retirement, they still have only about $50,000 left at 90. $50,000, that's 10 months of expenses at age 90, in the best scenarios. That pause you just felt, that's the sequence of returns problem making itself known. Here's why the phrase, the market averages 7% annually, is one of the most misleading sentences in personal finance. It's not wrong. It's just dangerously incomplete. Imagine 2 people retire on the same day with $200,000 each. Same portfolio. Same average annual market return of 7% over 10 years. But person A gets strong returns in years 1 through 5 and weak returns in years 6 through 10. Person B gets the weak years first. At the end of the decade, both experience the same average return. Person A has roughly $320,000. Person B has about $140,000, same average performance. $180,000 difference in outcome because person B had to sell shares at depressed prices just to pay for groceries in the early years. And those shares never recovered inside the portfolio. The math doesn't care that the market eventually came back. Those shares are gone. You don't get to choose your sequence. You retire when you retire. The market does what it does the year you retire and the year after that. And those first 5 years matter more than all the years that follow them combined. This is why the famous 4% withdrawal rule, developed by researcher William Bengen in 1994, is now considered outdated by serious institutional researchers. It was built for a 30-year retirement using historical data from 1926 onward, and it assumed market return distributions that were standard for that period. Morningstar's retirement research team now puts the sustainable initial withdrawal rate for a 30-year 60/40 portfolio at closer to 3.3%. Not 4, 3.3 on $200,000 liquid. That's $6,600 a year from your portfolio. Add $2,000 a month from Social Security, $24,000 annually, and you're at $30,600 against $60,000 in spending. That's a $29,400 annual gap that you cover by either drawing more than the sustainable rate, finding another income source, or spending less. There isn't a fourth option. The vending machine is charging more than the accessible slot can output. A sustainable withdrawal rate of 3.3% on $200,000. So I can take out $6,000 a year from my portfolio. Correct. That's about a used Honda Accord payment per year. Congratulations on your retirement. By the way, hit subscribe if you're finding this useful. YouTube's algorithm may genuinely never show you my content again if you don't. That sounds like a line. It's just how content distribution on this platform actually works. Now here's the reversal that most retirement content never gets to. You think the problem is that people didn't save enough. That is true, but it's not the primary problem. The primary problem is that the retirement vehicle was designed for a 7-year retirement and it's being asked to do 20. The defined benefit pension, the guaranteed monthly income for life, separate from savings, that your grandfather received is functionally extinct in the private sector. By the time Gen X entered the workforce in the late 80s, companies were converting pensions to 401k plans at an industrial scale. The framing at the time was, you'll have more control over your money. What actually happened is that the longevity risk transferred from the institution to the individual. Your grandfather's pension was the corporation's funding problem for as long as he lived. Your 401k is entirely your problem to accumulate, manage, protect, and not panic liquidate during every market crisis. For however long you live, which is an actuarially increasing number nobody gave you a manual for. There are about 60 million retirees in the United States right now, and roughly 70 million Gen Xers born between 1965 and 1980 are starting to join them. The oldest Gen Xers turn 60 in 2025. The wave is just beginning. This cohort came of age financially during wage stagnation, 2 housing crashes, the 2008 financial crisis, pension extinction, and a decade of near zero interest rates that made disciplined saving feel economically irrational. The savings deficit isn't random. It's the predictable output of 30 years of structural headwinds hitting the same generation. Now here's something that sounds reassuring but contains a quiet trap. Social Security is actually a stronger floor than most people have been trained to believe. Andrew Biggs, who served as Principal Deputy Commissioner of the Social Security Administration and led significant portions of their research, published a piece in the Wall Street Journal arguing that most Americans don't need $1 million to retire. In the Fed survey, retirees who reported living comfortably had between $100,000 and $250,000 in savings, not $1 million. And a central reason that works is Social Security. An average couple retiring in 2022 received combined annual benefits of nearly $46,000, up from about $34,600 in inflation-adjusted terms. Back in 2000, before touching a single dollar of personal savings, a typical couple was already earning more than twice the elderly poverty threshold. That is real. That matters. Social Security is doing more work than most people give it credit for. Here's the trap inside it. $46,000 sounds significant until you remember that average retired households spend $60,000. There's still a $14,000 annual gap. And the program's own trustees project in the Social Security Administration's most recent annual report that the trust fund is on track to face a roughly 23% benefit cut around 2033 if Congress doesn't intervene. That's not a political claim. That's from the program's own actuaries. Whether Congress acts, how, and in what direction, I genuinely don't know, and anyone who tells you confidently is selling something. What I do know is that building a 20-year retirement plan on a system that its own administrators have flagged as structurally underfunded is a specific kind of risk that most planning software doesn't model. This is where I need to stop on Social Security timing, because this might be the most expensive financial decision most Americans make by default, without a single calculation, purely out of psychological habit. You can claim Social Security as early as 62. You can delay all the way to 70. Every year you delay between 62 and 70, your monthly benefit grows by roughly 8% in guaranteed terms. 8% guaranteed. There's no financial product in any institution anywhere that offers 8% guaranteed. Not government bonds, not annuities, not anything. And yet, according to Social Security Administration data, roughly half of Americans claim at 62, the earliest option, permanently locking in a benefit that's about 30% below what they'd receive at full retirement age. 30% less. Every single month for the rest of their life and for the surviving spouse after that. Why? Because 62 is now and 70 is 8 years from now. The human brain treats future rewards as worth less than present ones in a way that's mathematically irrational at this scale. Behavioral economists call it hyperbolic discounting. The average person who claims at 62 instead of 67 forgoes somewhere between $60,000 and $120,000 in cumulative lifetime benefits, depending on longevity. That is not a marginal difference. That is the largest financial decision in many people's retirements made without any deliberation. In a Social Security office, the month they turn 62, because they wanted it to start. For married couples, the stakes double. When one spouse dies, the survivor receives the higher of the two monthly benefits. So the higher earner delaying to 70 isn't optimizing their own check. They're building the floor their surviving spouse will stand on for potentially decades. This is the difference between a 79-year-old widow receiving $3,000 a month and receiving $2,100 a month, $900 a month for the rest of her life. That's not a rounding error. That's rent in some states. Gerald, in case you've been wondering, claimed at 62 he was still working part-time. He thought he'd reinvest the early benefit checks and the math would come out even. It doesn't come out even unless you die early, and even then, only marginally. And the point of this discussion is that you'd like not to. He locked in a permanent discount on the most reliable, guaranteed income stream available to him, built the rest of his retirement plan on the reduced number, then spent 18 months wondering why the math kept feeling slightly off. The vending machine problem, operating at the income level, Gerald had access to more product than the slot was delivering, and he never unlocked the second compartment. There's a behavioral economics study I keep coming back to when I think about why people make this decision. In the 90s, researchers gave half the participants a coffee mug and half a chocolate bar. The two items were roughly equal in market value. Nearly 90% of people given the mug refused to trade it for the chocolate bar, and vice versa. Same value, different default. The thing in your hand feels irreplaceable in a way that the thing you could have doesn't. Your house feels like home. Your 401k feels like a number on a screen. Early Social Security feels like cash in your account. Delayed Social Security feels like a theoretical future promise. They're materially the same dollar value, often with the delayed version being worth significantly more. But the psychological wrapper changes how real each one feels. And that wrapper has been quietly draining retirement accounts for 30 years. I claimed at 62 and put the money in an index fund. I came out ahead. I've heard this argument in the scenario where you die at 74, it might be true. In the scenario where you live past 82, which is statistically more likely for a person in average health who reaches 65, it's almost always wrong. The break-even age between claiming early and claiming at 70 is typically somewhere around 78 to 80, depending on your benefit amount. After that, every month is money that's permanently gone from the early claimer's lifetime total. Now, let me give you the 4 moves. These are not generic. These are specific to this exact problem, and they're ordered by how much runway each one actually buys. Move 1. Reframe what early retirement means before you retire. There's significant research from the Stanford Center on Longevity showing that part-time work generating $15,000 to $20,000 annually in early retirement extends portfolio longevity by 6 to 8 years. Not because the income is large, because every dollar you earn is a dollar you don't withdraw. If your annual spending gap, the amount not covered by Social Security, is $22,000, and you earn $15,000 part-time, you're only drawing $7,000 from the portfolio. On $200,000, that's a 3.5% withdrawal rate. Sustainable, $22,000 is 11%. That's not sustainable. 6 to 8 years of additional longevity from a part-time income that most 66-year-olds are physically and cognitively capable of generating. The barrier is psychological, not physical. Retirement means full exit from economic participation in most people's mental models. That model is costing years of solvency. Move 2. Make the housing decision deliberately, before you're forced to. The Vanguard mobility data shows the natural window for relocation is between 60 and 68, before health constraints narrow the options, before the emotional attachment to the house calcifies into something that feels non-negotiable. Moving from a $350,000 house in a high-cost, high-tax state to a $175,000 house in a lower-cost, tax-favorable state at 63 frees up $150,000 in equity. Added to $200,000 liquid, you've got $350,000 accessible. The Monte Carlo output for $350,000 versus $200,000 looks entirely different. Median depletion age shifts from 84 to past 90. The unlucky 20% of simulations now reaches 85 instead of 79. One intentional housing decision, made from a position of strength rather than crisis, changes every downstream number. Move 3. Run a Social Security optimization before making any other retirement financial decision. A free tool called Open Social Security, built by actuary Mike Piper, takes your age, your spouse's age, your earnings records, and runs the optimal claiming strategy, including coordinated spousal timing. It takes about 4 minutes. The value differential between optimal claiming and default early claim behavior is routinely the largest single financial decision in a retirement plan. More impactful than your investment allocation. More impactful than your fee structure. More impactful than your asset location strategy. Most people have never spent 4 minutes on it. Move 4. Use the tax geography of the United States with intention. States like Florida, Nevada, Wyoming, Tennessee, and Texas have no state income tax. Several of these also don't tax Social Security benefits. Multiple states have property tax relief programs specifically for retirees over 65 that can reduce annual bills by 20 to 40%, not widely advertised, rarely claimed. The difference between an identical $60,000 annual retirement income in New Jersey versus Florida can be north of $5,000 in state and local taxes per year. Over 20 years of retirement, that's $100,000. $100,000 that didn't compound, didn't cover the healthcare spike at 74, didn't extend the runway by a single month. It just went to a state government that wrote its tax code without you in mind. You don't have to love Florida. The math doesn't require you to like the weather. It just requires you to look at the number. Gerald eventually got a spreadsheet from his daughter. She was 34, worked in corporate finance, and had run the analysis Gerald had never quite forced himself to do. She showed him that staying in his current house for 10 years versus downsizing to a smaller property in a tax-favorable state would cost him conservatively close to $200,000 across higher annual costs, foregone freed equity, and tax liability. Gerald moved at 68. Not because he was in crisis, because the spreadsheet was more persuasive than his attachment to a specific zip code. He said later the hardest part wasn't packing the house or navigating the sale. The hardest part was the 18 months before spent telling himself he didn't need to do it. That gap between knowing something and being willing to act on it is where most retirement money silently disappears. Not in bad investments, not in spectacular crashes, in the slow compound friction of psychological inertia applied to a math problem that gets less solvable every year you wait. the endowment effect, the status quo bias, the hyperbolic discounting on delayed benefits. These aren't character flaws. They're features of a brain that wasn't designed for a 30-year withdrawal horizon in a system that was barely designed for a 10-year one. One last piece I haven't touched yet, because it's the one that tends to detonate after everything else has been figured out: healthcare. Fidelity's 2024 estimate for a retired couple, $315,000 over the course of retirement, not counting long-term care, growing at roughly 5 to 6% annually, faster than general inflation, faster than Social Security, cost of living adjustments, faster than most conservative portfolio return assumptions. And it doesn't arrive linearly. It arrives in spikes. Fine at 66, manageable at 70. Then a diagnosis at 74, or a hospitalization, or a change in Medicare coverage, and the annual out-of-pocket cost triples in a single year. Unlike sequence of returns risk, healthcare cost risk only moves one direction. There is no recovery year for your kidneys. The one tool specifically designed to buffer this is the health savings account. If you're enrolled in a high deductible health plan, HSA contributions are tax deductible going in, grow tax-free inside the account, and come out tax-free for qualified medical expenses. That's triple tax advantage. It's the only account in the United States tax code with that structure. The 2025 contribution limits are $4,300 for individuals and $8,550 for families. If you're in your 40s, maximize it, invest it, and don't drain it for current expenses. You're building a dedicated healthcare reserve that's sitting completely tax-free, waiting for the spike that is statistically certain to come. After 65, you lose the ability to contribute. The window to build the buffer is right now. Every year you don't maximize, it is a year of compounding healthcare protection you'll never get back. 3 practical takeaways. Specific ones. Run a Social Security optimization this week, not eventually. Open Social Security at opensocialsecurity.com is free, built by an actuary, and handles spousal benefit coordination. The difference between your default claiming behavior and the mathematically optimal strategy is frequently the most valuable financial decision in your entire retirement. 4 minutes. You've spent more time than that reading product reviews for things you never bought. Separate your net worth into 2 columns right now. Column A, liquid and accessible within 30 days. Column B, everything else: house, illiquid assets, money you can only access by selling something you don't want to sell. Do all retirement planning using column A only. Don't let the combined number numb you to the gap. The vending machine display shows you the full inventory. The accessible slot only accepts one denomination. If you're on a qualifying high deductible health plan, maximize your HSA starting now and invest it rather than spending it annually. Treat it as a dedicated healthcare reserve, not a medical checking account. After 65, you can't contribute. The compounding window is open now and it closes on a fixed date. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the people who designed the retirement system you're currently navigating, they retired with pensions.